Okay, we're going to look at the addWombats method, and in this method what we are asked to do is to place two wombats in the world randomly but at different locations. And so let's write that in the comments documentation. Whoops. Okay, two different locations. And to do this, we need to have four variables, because x1, y1 being the first coordinate for the first wombat, and the second wombat will have the coordinate x2, y2. Alright, and we need to declare them as integers because they are to be placed in the world, and the world has coordinates going from 0 to 7 this way and 0 to 7 this way. That's the x coordinate, and this is the y coordinate. So we want the computer to generate a random number for us, and it will be an integer. Okay, let's now declare them as integers. So we indent, because everything inside the method is indented. First, an integer x1, y1, x2 and y2, they're declared as integers. Notice we don't have to have them in different lines, int x1, int x2, etc., because we can just do it in one go here, and we don't have initializing of these variables. We don't have to set them to 0 or any number, because we are just going to generate them randomly. We generally initialize them when we need to use it in a calculation, and we need an initial value to start with, but in this case we don't. So now as we get in after declaring, we need to look at the question that actually says start a do loop, okay, do while loop, because we need to generate the four numbers and keep generating them if they happen to be the same location. If the coordinates that are randomly generated are in the same location, it places the two wombats in the same location, we want to go back and ask for another 4. So let's do the do loop. Every time, whenever I start a loop or a set statement, I will normally do the skeleton of the statement and then fill it in. That way we don't forget the curly brackets. That needs to include all the statements within here as part of the do loop, and then the condition must be in normal brackets. Okay, let's put what needs to go in here. What are the statements that need to be repeated? First, we need to find a variable that's the x1 coordinate, and then assign into it a randomly generated number. Now, how do we generate a random number? In the question it says use the Greenfoot method, get random number. But if you need to know more about it, how to call it, how many parameters it needs, what does it return, we normally can go into the Wombat world, or the Greenfoot here, and help and Greenfoot class documentation. So click that, and in here we can see the Greenfoot class. We click on that, scroll down, and you will see the get random number. Here is what we are looking for. Get random number, it says it returns a random number between 0 inclusive and the limit that we give. So when we call the method, we have to say get random number, but not just that, we have to pass within the brackets, we have to pass in an integer. Notice it is expecting an integer, and then it returns an integer as well. Okay, in other words, it returns a number for us because that's what we want. If we say, for example, get random number 10, it will give me a random number between 0 and 9 including, but not 10, because it says the limit is excluded, right? So we've got Now we know how this works. We always have to look at the method documentation to figure out what does the method do and what are the parameters it requires and what does it return. Remember, because when a method returns something, we call it differently to when a method does not return anything. Okay, when a method does not return something, we can just call it on its line on its own, semicolon, that's it. But when it returns something, we need to allocate it into a variable or use it in a calculation. So let's go in here and go back and put, and because it's coming from Greenfoot class, we need to put Greenfoot dot get random number, and then within brackets we are passing the number 8 because we want 0 to 7, any number from 0 to 7. And now we'll copy and paste that line because we want to do the same for all the others. So we can have x1 and y1 and x2 and y2. Okay, 4 numbers generated, but we want to keep on generating these numbers while they are the same, because if the generated number places the wombats in the same place. Now how do we know the wombats placed in the same place? We see that the x coordinates are the same and the y coordinates are the same, so we can check this. Is x1 equal to x2, right, and y1 equal to y2? Now it will still work without extra brackets in here, but if you're like me, I like to have the extra brackets to see that this is the condition that's tested and this is the other condition, and together this and this is within this outer brackets, which is the brackets for the while loop. Now you don't need it, it will still work without it, but if you like to put it, you can. And so how does the while loop work? I mean, do while loop work? It gets in without checking any condition. First thing, it enters into the loop and it does allocate random numbers, and then it goes to check, are these random numbers placing the wombats in the same place? x1 is equal to x2 and y1 is equal to y2. Are they? If it is, go back into the loop and do these 4 statements again. And so when will you be able to get out of the loop? It's when you have different numbers. Okay, so let's write a comment here. As long as the computer generated number or the random numbers locations for the 2 wombats are the same, keep looping to get random numbers. That's what you're doing here. That's what is happening. And then once you come out of the loop, remember, the only reason you'll be able to come out of that loop is when the locations are different. So when you do come out, you can now actually place the wombat into the world. We can say add object, new hungry wombat, comma, you need the location of the wombat. What's the location of the first wombat? It's x1 comma y1, and then the next one, we copy and paste this again. Next wombat will be placed in x2 and y2. Okay, so after that the wombats have been placed in the world. That's it. Now something else I do is comment this as end of addWombats, because sometimes all these curly brackets are everywhere, you might forget what is that for. Now in this case you don't really have to, because the while loop is right under, but sometimes for for loops and if statements it's nice to have just a little, few words here saying what is the ending, what is this curly bracket, starting or ending. Now that's the end of the addWombats. Thank you for listening.